Most people live their entire lives without realizing they are quietly undervaluing themselves. They chase approval from others, measure their worth by possessions, or wait for recognition that never comes. The Stoics believed this was one of the greatest mistakes a person could make, to forget that true value is found not in wealth, status, or applause, but in the way you think and the way you live. Ask yourself honestly, how often do you judge your worth by what is outside your control? What if the life you're living right now is smaller than it should be, simply because you've been measuring yourself by the wrong standard? In this video, we're going to explore why most people fail to see their own value and how the wisdom of the Stoics can change that. We'll look at why external achievements, praise, and comparison often mislead us into thinking we are less than we truly are. You'll discover the simple yet profound principle that your worth comes from your thoughts, choices, and character, not from what the world tells you. By the end, you'll see how to recognize the inner strength you already possess and begin living with a sense of self-respect that no circumstance can take away. The Stoics believed that true value is not measured by wealth, fame, or outward success, but by virtue, the ability to live with reason, justice, courage, and self-control. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person's worth is reflected in how they govern their own mind, how they respond to challenges, and how they treat others. Unlike modern society, which often tells us that we are only as valuable as our accomplishments or the recognition we receive, the Stoics taught that the foundation of self-worth lies within. If you act with integrity, face adversity calmly, and cultivate wisdom, you are already living a life of true value. External achievements may bring comfort or temporary admiration, but they can be lost in an instant. Your character, however, cannot be taken from you. Understanding this principle is the first step towards seeing yourself clearly, free from the illusions of social comparison or fleeting success. When you measure your life by virtue rather than approval, you start to realize that you have been undervaluing yourself simply by relying on the wrong standards. This shift does not require fame, wealth, or extraordinary circumstances. It requires attention to your own thoughts, actions, and the small choices you make every day. In essence, the Stoics ask you to look inward, to find in yourself a source of worth that is stable, enduring, and entirely within your control. Most people fail to see their true worth because they constantly measure themselves against the expectations and opinions of others. From a young age, we are taught to compare our achievements, looks, and status with those around us, and we internalize these comparisons as a measure of our value. The Stoics saw this as a form of slavery, a dependence on external judgment that blinds us to the strength and virtue already within us. Epictetus often reminded his students that it is not what happens to us, but how we judge it, that shapes our experience. When you let the world decide your value, you give away the one thing you truly own, your judgment. Imagine spending decades striving for approval that is never guaranteed, only to realize that the approval never changes who you are. It only shifts the way others see you. The Stoics teach that self-worth should be rooted in what is up to us, our actions, our reasoning, and our ability to live rightly. When you start measuring yourself by your own standards of integrity and wisdom, you begin to recognize the subtle ways you have been undervaluing yourself all along. And this is not about pride or arrogance, it is about clarity. You are more capable, resilient, and virtuous than you allow yourself to see when you rely on others to tell you your value. External achievements often create the illusion of value, but they are fragile and fleeting. Fame can vanish overnight, wealth can disappear in a single miscalculation, and power can be taken away by forces beyond your control. The Stoics constantly reminded themselves that placing your worth in these things is like building a house on sand. It may stand for a while, but it will not endure. Consider the story of a Roman general celebrated for his victories, whose name was sung in the streets, only to be forgotten decades later. His accomplishments mattered to others for a time, but they did not secure his lasting value. In contrast, the qualities of courage, wisdom, and self-discipline are enduring. Even when stripped of honors, wealth, or recognition, a person who has cultivated virtue retains an inner strength that cannot be lost. Modern society encourages us to seek validation through external markers, job titles, social media followers, material possessions, but these are unreliable indicators of true worth. The Stoics argue that this focus misleads people into undervaluing themselves, because they are comparing their inner potential to fleeting external measures. When you start to recognize that your real strength comes from your ability to act rightly, to endure difficulty with calm, and to make reasoned choices, you begin to see that what is truly yours cannot be taken away. In this light, external achievements may be pleasant or useful, but they are never the foundation of your value. People often undervalue themselves because they forget the abilities and resources they already possess. The Stoics called this self-forgetfulness, a failure to recognize that the mind itself is a powerful tool capable of reason, reflection, and calm in the face of difficulty. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reminded himself daily not to be ruled by anger, fear, or desire, and to remember that he already possessed the capacity to endure hardship and act wisely. Yet most of us move through life as if these inner strengths are limited or unreliable. We overestimate obstacles and underestimate our ability to respond with clarity and courage. This leads to a quiet erosion of confidence, a sense that we are smaller, weaker, or less capable than we truly are. In reality, you already have what you need to face challenges with composure, to make thoughtful decisions, and to live a life aligned with your values. The problem is that we rarely pause to acknowledge this, distracted by external pressures and comparisons. The Stoics teach that by turning inward and cultivating awareness of our own reason and judgment, we can reclaim a sense of self-worth that is independent of circumstance. Every time you remember that you possess the tools to act with virtue, you are quietly reinforcing the truth. Your value has never depended on anything outside yourself. Recognizing this is the first step toward living fully, without underestimating the inner strength that has always been yours. Seeking approval from others is one of the most common ways people undervalue themselves. When we base our sense of worth on praise, recognition, or validation, we place our value in the hands of forces we cannot control. Epictetus compared flattery to chains, reminding his students that relying on the opinions of others enslaves the mind. In today's world, this might look like counting likes on social media, craving compliments at work, or seeking validation from friends and family. Each time we measure ourselves by how others see us, we risk feeling smaller, weaker, or insufficient. The Stoics teach that freedom and self-worth come from within, from cultivating our own judgment and living according to reason and virtue. When you stop looking outward for approval and begin to rely on your own standards of right and wrong, you discover a stable and lasting sense of value. It does not mean you ignore feedback or refuse to grow. It means that your self-esteem is rooted in your own actions and choices, not in the shifting opinions of others. The moment you recognize this, you begin to see how often you have undervalued yourself simply by depending on applause. You are capable, worthy, and complete, not because others say so, but because your character and reason define your true worth. Fear is another reason many people quietly undervalue themselves. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, or fear of making the wrong choice can shrink the way we see our own potential. We hesitate, we hold back, and in doing so, we silently convince ourselves that we are less capable than we truly are. The Stoics understood that fear is natural, but they emphasized that courage is not the absence of fear, It is acting according to reason and virtue despite fear. Seneca faced exile and danger, yet he refused to surrender his self-respect or compromise his principles. When we allow fear to dictate our actions, we give away control over our own value. Every time we step forward in spite of fear, no matter how small the action, we affirm that our worth is not measured by what could go wrong, but by the choices we make and the integrity we maintain. Recognizing this is liberating. Fear no longer diminishes your value, it only tests your resolve. The Stoics teach that by facing challenges with reasoned courage, we begin to reclaim the self-worth we may have underestimated for years. You are stronger, more resilient, and more capable than the fears that try to convince you otherwise. Desire can quietly erode the way we value ourselves. When we constantly want what others have, status, wealth, beauty, or recognition, we are implicitly saying that we are lacking. Epictetus told the story of a slave who longed for freedom, only to realize that true freedom comes not from external circumstances, but from mastery over one's desires. The same principle applies to self-worth. Longing for what is outside your control convinces you that what you already are is not enough. Modern life amplifies this problem. We scroll through carefully curated images and posts, comparing ourselves to others who appear more successful, more attractive, or more accomplished. Each comparison quietly chips away at our sense of inner value. The Stoics remind us that desires are not inherently bad, but unchecked longing leads to dissatisfaction and underestimation of our own abilities. When you learn to measure your life by your own choices, your reasoned actions, and your capacity for virtue, you begin to see that you have been sufficient all along. The things you crave may be pleasant, but they do not define your worth. Your true value comes from how you live, how you respond to challenges, and how you govern your own mind, not from what others possess or what you have yet to achieve. Recognizing this shifts the way you see yourself, revealing the strength and completeness that have always been within. Comparison is one of the most silent and dangerous ways people undervalue themselves. We look at the lives of others and assume they are somehow more capable, more talented, or more deserving. Social media has made this problem constant, with images and stories that highlight only the best moments of other people's lives. The Stoics warned against this habit, teaching that judging yourself against others is meaningless because their circumstances, choices, and struggles are not yours. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we should focus on our own path, our own actions, and our own reasoned judgment. Every time you compare yourself to someone else, you risk ignoring the unique strengths, experiences, and virtues that make you who you are. It is like measuring a tree against the sun. Each grows in its own way, according to its own nature. By recognizing this, you can stop undervaluing yourself based on someone else's journey. Instead, measure yourself by the growth of your own mind, the consistency of your actions, and your ability to live with integrity. When you shift your focus inward, you see that comparison is not only unnecessary, but it also obscures the value that has always been yours. True self-worth comes from understanding and cultivating your own character, not from trying to fit into someone else's measure. Many people fail to recognize their own value because they underestimate the power of small, consistent actions. The Stoics taught that greatness is built not only through extraordinary feats, but through daily choices that reflect reason, integrity, and discipline. Epictetus emphasized that we are shaped by the repeated actions of our life, much like a sculptor forms a statue through careful, deliberate strikes. Yet most of us overlook these small victories, thinking that only grand achievements define worth. We forget that showing patience in a difficult moment, speaking truth when it is hard, or keeping a calm mind in chaos are all demonstrations of strength and virtue. When you fail to notice these moments, you undervalue yourself because you are ignoring the evidence of your own capability. Stoic wisdom encourages us to pay attention to these small acts, to recognize the power we wield in our daily choices. Your value is not only in the big events or public recognition, but in the quiet, persistent ways you live rightly. When you begin to see the significance of these ordinary moments, you start to understand that you have been undervaluing yourself all along. You possess more resilience, wisdom, and virtue than you often acknowledge. Regret and dwelling on past mistakes can also make people undervalue themselves. When we focus on what we did wrong, we forget to see what we did right, and we allow a few errors to overshadow years of careful thought and virtuous action. The Stoics believed that the past is beyond our control and should not define our worth. Seneca wrote that we should treat mistakes as lessons, not as marks against our value. Every error is an opportunity to strengthen our judgment, to act more wisely, and to practice resilience. Yet most of us carry the weight of past failures as if they diminish who we are at this moment. When you allow regret to dictate your sense of self, you are underestimating the growth, learning, and perseverance you have demonstrated over time. The Stoics remind us that value is not static, and it is not defined by a single moment. By focusing on the present and on how you respond to challenges today, you reclaim a sense of self-worth that is independent of what has already happened. Recognizing this allows you to see that you have been more capable, more thoughtful, and more resilient than you have given yourself credit for. Your past mistakes do not erase your inner strength. They highlight the opportunity to exercise it. Resilience is a quality that most people overlook when assessing their own value. Life inevitably brings hardships, loss, disappointment, and unexpected challenges, but the way we respond to these events defines our true worth. The Stoics taught that adversity is not a punishment, but a test and an opportunity to exercise reason and virtue. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that obstacles do not harm the soul, they reveal the strength already within. Many people fail to see this, judging themselves only by what they accomplish when life is easy. They undervalue the quiet courage it takes to endure suffering with composure, to remain patient under pressure, or to act rightly when circumstances are difficult. Every time you navigate a challenge without giving in to anger, despair, or fear, you demonstrate a strength that is permanent and wholly your own. By recognizing your resilience, you begin to see that self-worth is not conditional on external success or praise, but on your ability to meet life with a calm and rational mind. Understanding this allows you to stop underestimating yourself, because you realize that the capacity to endure and act with virtue has always been part of who you are. Resilience is proof that your value is deep, enduring, and entirely independent of circumstance. Reclaiming inner authority is central to understanding your true worth. The Stoics taught that our judgments, choices, and actions are always within our control, while everything else, fortune, reputation, health, or possessions, belongs to chance. When you base your value on things outside your control, you place your sense of self on unstable ground. One setback, one criticism, or one loss can make you feel diminished. But when you recognize that your worth lies in what is truly yours, your reason, your integrity, your capacity to act justly, you take back authority over your own life. Imagine a soldier who finds peace not in victory or praise, but in the knowledge that he carried out his duty with honor. His value is not dependent on outcome, but on his faithful adherence to principle. In the same way, your worth is not tied to success or failure, but to the clarity of your choices and the steadiness of your actions. Most people undervalue themselves because they forget this inner authority and look outward for validation. The Stoics remind us that by grounding ourselves in what we can control, we reclaim a sense of dignity that no loss can erase. This recognition transforms how you see yourself, not as someone waiting to be valued by the world, but as someone whose worth is already secured by the power of your own mind and will. There comes a moment, often quiet and unexpected, when a person realizes that their worth has never depended on what they owned, achieved, or received from others. The Stoics called this the turning inward, the recognition that within the mind lies a source of value that is unshakable. Marcus Aurelius expressed it simply: look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. This realization is not about becoming something new, but about seeing clearly what has always been present. Many spend years chasing approval, possessions, or status, only to find that the pursuit never resolves their unease. The moment of awakening comes when you recognize that your ability to choose rightly, to think clearly, and to live with integrity is already enough. Imagine facing a challenge, and instead of asking, "What will others think of me?" you ask, "Am I living according to reason and virtue?" That single shift changes everything. You stop undervaluing yourself because you no longer measure by standards that are outside your control. You begin to see that even in hardship, you retain the power to act with courage, patience, and justice. This moment is not dramatic or loud. It is steady, like a light being uncovered. And once you see it, you cannot return to the old way of thinking. And you realize you have been carrying your true worth with you all along. Most people underestimate themselves because they measure their worth by things that can be lost or taken away. They look to approval, possessions, comparison, or achievements to tell them who they are, and in doing so, they quietly place their value outside themselves. The Stoics showed a different way. They reminded us that true worth comes not from what we own or what others say, but from how we live, from our reason, our integrity, our courage, and our discipline. These qualities cannot be stripped from us, no matter the circumstance. When we forget this, we undervalue ourselves, believing we are less than we are. But when we remember, even for a moment, that every choice we make and every thought we govern is proof of our strength, we see ourselves more clearly. You are not defined by titles, by fleeting successes, or by mistakes from the past. You are defined by the character you cultivate, by the way you meet life with calm and purpose. The Stoic truth is simple. You already possess within you all the worth you seek. To live with awareness of this is to live free, to no longer chase shadows of value in the world outside, but to draw from the steady light that has always been within. If this message resonated with you, watch the next video, where we explore how Stoic wisdom can help you find calm in a world that thrives on chaos.